Hey, it's Peter from Piston Ported, and welcome back to another video about how to work on your scooter. For this particular video, we are going to drop a Lambretta engine from a Series 3 Lambretta. It'll apply to all Series 1 through GP Lambrettas, so if you have a Series 1 or a Series 2 or a Series 3 or a Cervetta, or a GP, Indian, or Italian, it doesn't matter. It's gonna work for all of those. So stay tuned, and I hope you like it. All right, the first thing that we're gonna do to take the engine out is we need to remove the cables. And this is a road-going Lambretta, which means I'm not gonna be, changing the cables or anything like that when I pull the engine out. I'm just going to pull the engine out, and I don't want to disturb the cables. So in order to do that, I'm going to show you a few tricks as to how I do that. And they're not really tricks. I just think that that's how it was intended by design. So, one of the things we're going to do is there's two 10 millimeter head bolts right here that hold the chain adjuster block or the cable adjuster block in place. We'll remove those. Back here you got the butterfly or the batwing or whatever you want to call it, and that has a circlip here you can remove, and you can also just remove the two bolts here. You'll still be connected at the rear, but we're gonna go ahead and take care of that by taking that circlip underneath that boot out. Before we can do any of that, we have to go ahead and unhook the clutch cable from the clutch cable arm. Now, to remove the clutch cable from the clutch cable arm, there's a couple ways you can do that. I have another fancy tool here from On the Lam. You can get those from Mike and all. He sells them on the Lambretta Club's website, and Scooter Speed also stocks those. And this is just made just for removing clutch cable arms. The cables off the arm. So you can see how that works. Now, if you don't have one of those, go ahead and get this back into position here, so like that. Now, if you don't have one of those, you can use what I used for years, which is just a channel lock player. These work excellent. Can't say enough good things about just a basic channel lock player. And you just set it up so it's not too much, so it's about the perfect width there, and get yourself a grip on there, and then just give it like that, and then you can unhook the cable like that, and that's it. Clutch cable's off. And now that the clutch cable's off, we'll go ahead and remove this circlip here, and then we can just put, draw the butterfly up. So I'm just gonna get out my circlip pliers here, take that off. Take that off there, and then that's done. All right, and I'll just go ahead and take these off now. And that's one of the reasons you have to take the clutch cable off, is that so you can actually get at these two bolts back here. I've gone through and pried the boot off of Matt's tie rod, and as you can see here, there's a little circlip here. Which is going to be really hard for me to show you how to take off, but so I'll just go ahead and take it off. The next thing we'll do actually is we're going to remove the rear brake cable, and Matt's got one of these fancy ones on his scooter that doesn't have the spring and all that other garbage, so this will be a lot easier for us. So we'll just end up just taking this off and then feeding the cable straight through and pulling it out right here, and then all of the cables will be done, and we can move on from there. And the last thing we actually have to do on this side of the engine to drop it is take this plug cap off, or at least to get ready to drop it. There'll be a few other things we do, but just take the plug cap off, let it hang. Now, before we get to the wiring, I figure we better just go ahead and yank Matt's carburetor off. And before I get too far with the rest of this, I'm probably going to end up with a lot of questions about this particular air filter. It's a K&N. I'm not exactly sure what size it is as far as the length and the measurement or anything like that. But I do know that I made this particular tube by just going to the auto parts store and finding some of their exhaust adapters. They have some ones that are a transition piece, so they don't have different size at each end. I found the right size there, and I just brought it home, so that was like $2. And then I just cut it off, and that's his adapter piece there. And then this was just some sheet steel that I just drilled and bent, and then you know, mounted it with a little screw that goes through the filter into the bracket back here. Before I get too far on this, we do need to remove the fuel banjo off the side of the carburetor. So just make sure your fuel is turned off, and you know, on a PHBL or a PHBH, it's just a 10mm head bolt, and you can just undo that. And now we'll actually remove the clamp on the back, and then we can draw the whole thing out and do the rest of it here. And now that the clamps are loose, I can turn the carburetor a little bit, and then I can take my super long screwdriver and get in here and pull the choke. And we can just set that aside. All right, and these are just 8mm head bolts here. They're not very tight usually, just snugged up. We'll draw that out. And then you can see, you know, it's all connected there. And then if you go inside here, you can see there's that little shield. So we'll have to pull the spring up here and get that out of the way, like that. And then we can just, you know, push the needle up, draw that out. That little clip can come out. And then when you come over to the other side, you can see that little soldered nub is in there, and we're going to just go ahead and push that out. First, I want to get this O-ring out of the way. So you get as much as you can there like that. Hold it with your thumb, push it like that, and then move it to the other slot and pull it through. And that's it. Set that aside. And then we can actually just draw the carburetor off. Like that. Moving on to the wiring, what we have to do in regards to that is, you can see that there's this loom right here. Let me pull this filter out of the way. Going down to the top of the engine, and that's the stator loom. And then there's that right next to it. If you look right next to it over here, you can see that ground wire. And both of those are going to have to get unhooked so that we can withdraw the engine. So if you just trace those up, you know, the stator loom goes behind the gas tank, and then the ground loom is back here, and that's going to bolt to the frame in here on this particular one. And then as far as the stator loom, we got one coming out of it here, and then if you come around to the other side, you can see the rest of those are going to go right into here. You'll be able to see here that this white and this red and this green all have to come out, because those all go to the stator loom. So we'll go ahead and yank those. And then the white actually also jumps to a ground on the back here. So if you look back here, it jumps to a ground. So I'll go ahead and remove that, and then we'll swing back around to the other side. And back over on the left side, we're going into the regulator here, and for Matt's, he just has the one yellow coming out of there, so we can unhook that. And now the harness is actually free of the frame, so we can feed that through here and draw that out, you know, at the bottom down here, down there. And then the only thing I have left then is actually remove this little ground here, which is actually connected to this bolt that's holding the junction block on the back here. So I'll go ahead and take that off and get this drawn in down there. And the next step is actually dropping the engine, because we are free and clear at this point. And now we're actually ready to drop the engine. And to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and loosen the main engine bolt. And you can see on the right side I put a crescent wrench and I face it this way, and that's because when you go to the other side and start to loosen, this will draw it down, and then this floorboard will actually hold it in place for me. So if you come over to the other side, you can see it here, and then this is just a 24 millimeter. And then we'll just guide the nut on the other side. And then that's in place, and we can just loosen this. And only one side has to come off. And take that off, and set that aside. All right, and now we're just gonna loosen, actually remove the rear shock nuts. All right, now we're actually gonna drop the motor, and I'm gonna show you exactly how I do that. If you look under here, I have a little tiny jack going right to the frame in the center. And the reason is because the exhaust is installed and I can't put the jack on the engine itself. And the reason the jack is there is to actually take the weight off of the shock mount, the rear shock mounts back here. So we'll use the jack, we'll pump it up a little bit, and then and get the weight off of that shock so we can just pull that out. And you know when you got it if it just slides off by hand. So just, I only gave it a little bit, slides off by hand, you know, kinda like that. And then we're actually gonna lower the shock and allow the tail to drop on the onto the bump stop on the engine. As you can see here now, I have the engine gently leaning on the bump stop against the frame. Then if you come down under here, you can see I have some 2x4s wedged underneath the exhaust just to give it some support when we knock the engine bolt out so it doesn't kind of flail. I have a really long punch, and then I have my trusty plastic hammer, and I have this giant exhaust thing in my way, or this intake in my way, but I'll do my best to get it out. Doesn't take much usually. And it might be kind of hard to tell here, but I did end up sliding the engine back, just shifting the whole thing backwards, just to get this to clear the floorboards, because I didn't want this to hang up on the floorboard. And then I went ahead and I put all my cables so they're sitting on top of the engine mount, because they normally sit underneath it. And then now we're actually just going to jack the whole thing up, and the engine will be free and clear. And that's it. And just like that, you have successfully withdrawn your Lambretta engine from your Lambretta scooter so that you can easily work on whatever it is that you wanted to work on. Hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe.